Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox, and we're going to show here how Shirley-Anne Somerville, the SNP and the Greens, and all those who want to push degenerate policies are deeply, deeply mistaken. How they are lying, or at least deliberately deluding themselves as to motivation and facts. And we're going to have a look at the Butcher of Montrose as a prime example of where reality hits their delusional beliefs and where this horrible little man does things that go against everything they've said, and that they say, oh, this will never happen, until of course it does. But we all knew it would. We said in advance this is exactly what would happen, and then it did. And now they're saying, oh yes, but this isn't real. This isn't real. We're denying this reality. But what the reality is they are saying that the gender reform bill was not a charter for people like Andrew Miller to dress up as a woman and entice children who would not go with a man but sees a woman and take them into their car and abuse them for 27 hours. And the child involved was very lucky to get away alive. And they're saying that would never happen. And yet here we are. And it has. That shows that the gender reform bill is a dangerous act that will endanger children, women, and generally society at large. Let's take a look. It will never happen, they said, when we told them what would happen. They said people like that aren't that. Trans people aren't like that. Trans people don't dress up for sexual pleasure, and they won't entice children by pretending to be women, they said. And yet we said the very fact that it could happen means it will. And then what happens? It does. And that is the problem they've got. Reality slaps them in the face and they realise that reality is a bit of a bugger, isn't it? But they won't change their tune and they won't accept reality. They're still saying it's not important. The very fact that men can dress up as women and entice children isn't part of their problem, they say. And yet it is. SNP Minister rejected concerns about trans-peed Andrew Miller, saying that didn't damage the halted gender reforms bill, when absolutely it did. Scottish Government Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville completely rejected claims that the case of Borders Peed had shown the controversial gender reform recognition bill was not fit for purpose. He had this child, this little girl. She would never have got in the car with him. But he dressed up as a woman and she said, oh, I thought you was a woman and I got in because I thought I'd be safe. He then drove her to his house and then abused her for 27 hours. And as I say, normally after 24, they're dead. So she was very, very lucky to be alive. We all knew it would happen. We all said this is exactly the sort of thing that would happen. And they said, no, trans people don't dress up for sexual pleasure. Yeah, the 1 in a million people who are actually trans, I grant you, don't. But the vast majority of them do it for their sexual pleasure. They do it. They are autogynephiles. They want to pretend to be women and then touch their own nipples and go, oh, I'm a lesbian now, which is their code word for being a straight man with a dress fetish who wants to still have sex with women. They're not lesbians. Now, you can't talk, you don't even talk unless you get the chop. You're a man. And you will always be a man. Even after the chop, you're just a man who's had a chop. But at least I can give you the conviction of your beliefs if you have had your dick off. They call it transitioning, which is their words for I'm never cutting me cock off. An SNP minister moved to completely reject claims that the crimes of the trans-peed butcher Andrew Miller damaged the case for gender reforms in Scotland. Absolutely in denial. These people, she will still push this dangerous policy. Even though everyone said what would happen, and it has happened. And there is a child now traumatised for life because of this. The monster was convicted of abducting and assaulting a schoolgirl in the Scottish Borders while dressed as a woman. This provoked an outcry in Scotland and led to Scottish Tory MSP Rachel Hamilton writing to Humza Yousaf to point out his controversial gender reform recognition bill could lead to more cases like this, and it will. Lord Arthurson, who sentenced Miller to 20 years behind bars, said that the young girl would not have willingly entered his car if he appeared to be a man. He said the mode of abduction itself is, in my view, a significantly aggravating feature, if any were needed in such a case. And here, to speak plainly, I'm referring to your female presentation as you invited your victim into your car. One only has to ask oneself the simple question, would the young girl have willingly entered your car and you presented as a man? And the answer is that she would obviously have not. And therefore, being presented as a woman becomes, at that point, an issue for the safety of children. You also have the fact that people in prison who are trans are 10 times more likely to be in prison for sexual crimes, because all this dressing as a woman is a sexual proclivity. It turns them on. It gives them the fizz. Miss Hamilton claimed that the GRR bill would have allowed Miller and criminals like him the potential access to women's single-sex spaces and services, and she asked why the First Minister thought it was appropriate. She added, why should a convicted male criminal ever be allowed in women's single-sex spaces? Why should sex offenders be able to access women's services? Your GRR bill and the principle of universal self-ID, which it rests upon, would give dangerous men like, and she means him, the opportunity to abuse, threaten or attack women again. And it isn't just Miller, of course. There's lots of them, and we've covered them all in the past. So this horrible man should never be allowed to access women's spaces or services. He is a risk to women's safety. You must explain why your government does not agree. Well done, Rachel. The GR was blocked by Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack, who claimed that it interfered with the UK-wide Equality Act, and he used a Section 35 to stop it from getting royal assent. A court also agreed with his assessment after USAF took the decision to the court and lost, again, in a humiliating fashion, using £230,000 of taxpayer cash. He said it's an expensive mistake. They are trying to legitimise the abuse of women and children, doing so under the guise of equality. I don't think the parents of women and the parents of these children, or anyone who knows these women, wants them to be abused. And yet the Scottish Government seems intent deeply to do so. And Shirley-Anne Somerville is trying to push an act that will directly endanger children, as we have seen. And as the judge summed up, that this dressing as a woman was an absolute danger to children. And they're still pushing it. They don't care. They don't care. They want to sexualise children. This is the SNP, and we know what the P stands for. In response to Miss Hamilton's letter, the SNP Social Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville dismissed her concerns completely, and she wrote that there was no evidence that holding a gender recognition certificate is exploited by predatory offenders. Bada bing, yes there is. As I say, 6 out of 10 people trans in prison are there for sexual crimes. They don't do it because they want to be a woman. They do it because they got the fizz out of dressing as a woman. It is autogynephilia. Then you have the case of Miller. You have lots of other cases. The men in prison for the R of women and all that. She claimed that the GRR bill, which allows trans people to change gender without the need for a medical certificate if they were living for that gender as a minimum of 3 months, was an upgrade on current rules, as under the current UK Gender Recognition Act, there's no provision for denying a gender recognition certificate on the basis of risk, and there should be, because the very moment they want to become that, they are a risk. That, by definition, being trans is a risk. It's not to say that every trans is dangerous, but there is the risk, the percentage, the danger. And we've seen how it happens. We look at Miller, for example. Ms Somerville claimed that the Gender Recognition Reform Bill would allow an application to be paused or refused following a sexual harm prevention order, sexual offences prevention order, or sexual risk order. The bill's safeguards against the risk of sexual harm go further than those under the current process, she says. But those safeguards have been blocked by the UK's government's intervention. Yes, but the UK government doesn't want to put men who are women in a prison full of vulnerable women. The SNP do. And the SNP are quite happy for men like Andrew Miller to abuse children. That's the only conclusion you can draw from the fact that they're refusing to even acknowledge that this happened. It's a very sad state of affairs that you have people like this, and you've got to say, you have to ask why these people want definitely to endanger children by allowing people like that access to children. Strange, isn't it? But they are strange. The SNP are strange, and people who support them support the likes of that. If you're an SNP supporter, you want him to have access to children. You're a very strange lot. I'm coming up. They all seem to have this predilection for endangering people. They all want men who pretend to be women, these pretendy Wendies. Oh, we've got to give them more rights than anyone else. We've got to allow pretendy Wendies to expose themselves in front of children. If I expose myself in front of a child, I'll be arrested. But apparently it's okay for people like Miller and all that to go into a changing room where there may be young girls and get his little lady cock out. Probably only that big, isn't it? And, you know, oh, look at me as I'm getting changed because I'm a lady now, with the old cock swinging about. And that's what the SNP want. They want men like that to have access to rooms where there's vulnerable women, where there's young girls, where they can expose themselves. And that if you complain, that's hate speech, and you go to jail for complaining. You go to jail for protecting your children from peds like that. Welcome to the wonderful world of the SNP. And think about the people who vote for this. Their supporters are all pro-peds now. There we go. Isn't that a surprise? If you vote SNP, you're the party voting for peds, predators and pervs. Sums up the average SNP voter though, really, doesn't it? Oh well, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and guard your children from the SNP. Bye.